In 1939, four climbers entered the shadow of Nanga Parbat, seeking a hidden route where others had vanished. What they found was not a path, but the mountain's final warning before the world fell into war.
Hey, glad you're here. Welcome to the Himalayan Journals. Here on this channel, we bring to you real stories from century old field notes. We try to keep it simple and calm here. Think of it as a documented history of the Himalayas from the early 1900s, covering stories of indigenous wisdom, epic expeditions, and groundbreaking science, passed on just as they were recorded. Subscribe, zone out, binge.
Nanga Parbat, a name that had haunted climbers for decades. Rising to 26,650 feet, its vast flanks of ice and rock had already claimed lives long before 1939 A.F. Mummery, who first attempted it in 1891 from the Diamir Valley, had vanished into its glaciers with his two porters, never to return. Others followed, drawn by the same challenge. In 1932, Willy Merkel led a German expedition up from the Rakiot Valley along the northeast face. It became the classic route for all later attempts. But its 9-mile ascent and frequent avalanches made every expedition a fight against time, weather, and exhaustion. By 1938, Paul Bauer, who had led the latest expedition, began to doubt the safety of that side. He suggested that perhaps a shorter, though steeper, route might exist on the northwest face from the Diamir Valleys. The following year, in 1939, a small reconnaissance team was sent to find out. The German Himalayan expedition of that year would mark one of the last peaceful journeys before the world itself descended into war. The expedition was led by Peter Aufschneider, an experienced climber who had already explored Kanchenjunga. His team included Heinrich Harrer, who had recently made history by climbing the north face of the Eiger, Hans Lobenhofer, and Lutz Chicken, a medical student. They left Rawalpindi on May 11th, traveling through the Kagan Valley and over the Babusar Pass. On May 22nd, they reached the Indus near Gilas, then turned south into the narrow gorge of the Diamir Valley. There, below the towering slopes of Ganalo Ridge, they set up their base camp on June 1st at 12,600 feet. From the camp, Nanga Parbat's northwest face loomed immense, its glaciers cut by 3 rocky ribs, Mummery's route among them. The men spent their first week climbing the slopes opposite, studying the mountain structure and searching for a safe line. The Diamir Glacier, they noted, was choked with ice and exposed to avalanches. Any attempt through it would be perilous. So they turned instead to a set of ribs rising directly toward the North Peak. On June 13th, Lobenhofer and Chicken climbed the old Mummery rib and found, half buried in snow, a 10-inch piece of wood. Could it have belonged to Mummery's vanished party? They could not know. Soon after, an enormous avalanche from the Bozan Glacier swept across the area where they had planned to bivouac. That route, too, was abandoned. Their hopes now rested on the middle rib leading toward the North Peak. On June 15th, Aufschneider and Harrer established Camp 3 at 18,000 feet, above the icefall of the lower Diamir Glacier. From there, they climbed to about 20,000 feet through a maze of couloirs and ice slopes. The snow was hard at first, then turned to bare ice above them. A rampart of ice blocked the final ridge. In July, Harrer and Lobenhofer reached this point, setting up Camp 4 at roughly 20,300 feet. Beyond that, Aufschneider believed the North Peak might be reached over open snow slopes. Even so, the dangers were constant. Stonefall thundered down the couloirs each afternoon, and avalanches swept the lower routes without warning. On one night, an avalanche buried their tents in snow. Another crashed down as they were descending to Camp 2. At base camp, sickness struck Lobenhofer, developed septic fever from an untreated infection, and a porter suffered from pneumonia. Prontosil and Sympatol saved them, but recovery was slow. Through June, the weather stayed perfect. The skies clear, the nights cold. But when the team returned to the mountain in July, conditions had changed. The frozen layer of snow that had once covered the ice had melted away. The steep slopes turned into sheer ice walls. Harrer and Lobenhofer climbed again to the top of the middle rib, calling it as difficult as any climb in the Alps. Falling stones now threatened them all day, though avalanches had lessened. By late July, the mountain had spoken its warning. The Diamir face, they concluded, could perhaps be climbed in June, but never in July. Only the strongest porters and the most skilled climbers could hope to succeed. On July 23rd, Aufschneider and Chicken climbed a nearby peak of the Ganelo Ridge at 22,370 feet, gazing down through clouds to the Indus Valley far below. 3 days later, they left the Diamir Glacier. Harrer and Lobenhofer went down to Bunar and then to Rakiot Bridge. Aufschneider and Chicken crossed over Kachal Gali and Jilipur Pass into the Rakiot Valley. There, as the fog lifted, they saw for the first time the immense amphitheater of Nanga Parbat's eastern face. Compared to the narrow Diamir Valley, the Rakiot side was vast, open, and filled with light. Their conclusion was cautious, but hopeful. The Rakiot route remained technically easier, but the Diamir flank, though steep, offered promise for a future ascent. They left the mountains and regrouped in Srinagar by late August, preparing to sail home. Yet history intervened. Europe was on the brink of war. When they reached Karachi, they were interned, their climbing years abruptly cut short. The 1939 Nanga Parbat Reconnaissance had ended, not in failure, but in silence, as the world itself changed beyond recognition.